doing analysis here from the Proving Ground race from Sunday, March 3rd. So first I'm going to load up all the flights. It's an AAT task, so I'm putting in the AAT time, which is an hour and 30 minutes. So I'm opening all the IGC files that were converted from the FTR files that were downloaded from Condor Club. The Condor Club IGCs do not work directly. And as soon as I open one of these, it will load the whole folder of IGCs. Then I'm just going to go and calculate the results, and it's using the Condor index, so I hit no. And now they're in rank. I'm just going to put the data view to the essentials and take a look at the results kind of from the high level perspective. So I'm going to be looking at the flight for Hotel Golf 1 and for XCB and also for F1L. So just looking at the bit of the high level stats, the main issue here with Hotel Golf 1 was taking a penalty for a Q. So that's a big problem. Otherwise, the climb rate was quite good, which the race is often won in the climb. And for XCB, looks like, okay, so the climb rate is kind of about middle of the pack. And then for F1L, definitely looks like the climb rate was on the low side, and the detour was at 5%. So that's probably the big factor in the time there. And we can take a closer look at the tracks now by selecting them here one at a time. So now that all the tracks are selected, I can show them in detail view. And zoom in here a bit. So next thing I'm going to do is make sure it's on task time. Time compare doesn't work for an AAT task. It's a really useful feature to see where time is being lost and gained on sort of a metered basis, but it doesn't work for AATs. So it restricts things a little bit. And then the next thing I'll do is just take a look at the summary stats here and see if there's anything meaningful or useful to see. So just looking at the some of these stats here, these numbers here show kind of if you've been drifting optimally with the thermals in terms of the upwind and downwind turn points. So a lower number is better. So it looks like, for example, on F1L, the number is high there, so it might mean that there was more thermaling during the upwind leg. The netto, the VMAT, which shows the netto, and then very related to that is the number of points above expected glide, is looking good here. This might be inflated from the Q, likely is. And then this here, I believe that is inflated because of the polar on the LS4 being an older polar and not accurate. So the LS4 always looks like it gets better than expected netto. And then I can see kind of performance on kind of each leg segment. And notable here for Hotel Golf 1 is really strong first leg of the task, which later on would probably prove the undoing. And you can see here that it was a fairly poor climb rate for F1L. And that's some of the per leg summary. And then the next thing that we'll look at is kind of a section by section peek at the race here. So I'll start with Hotel Golf 1 and just take a quick look at the flight. I'll zoom in a bit just to see looking at the shape of the circles says a lot about the thermaling precision, and that has a big impact on overall climb rates. So good climb there. You can see another good climb in terms of the first 60 seconds, the last 60 seconds, and the overall climb rate. You can see the radius and the bank angle used, and then you can see how much time was gained or lost relative to other climbs. And yeah, there's another good climb there. So this leg was basically hitting over 9 knot plus climbs. Every thermal was producing that, so it maybe gave a false sense of security, and then hit a really, oh no, this isn't a really good one yet, but another quite good climb. And then this is the very good climb where it was over 11 knots average through the whole climb, and that strong climb gained about 51 seconds, or was 51 seconds faster. That's the right way to say it. Kind of lost 51 seconds on the overall time, but improved the time by 51 seconds. And so it was lots of shorter climbs staying high, which was actually quite important because I think with the wide thermals, the lift gets stronger as it gets closer to the cloud base. And then here's where things kind of went downhill. So sampling a thermal there, you can see sort of in the spike on the baryograph here, you can see where the pull-ups are, sampling, and then doing a couple circles and getting about a 7 and a bit average on that one. But because I'd been getting so many 9s, I just decided to keep pushing on, and was basically over optimistic and greedy from how fast the first leg was feeling very racy, so just kept pushing. Still had another chance here to climb again at just under 7 knots, but left it, and still another one. And then I pushed on to one cloud here where there was nothing, to another cloud where I got nothing, and then I got so close to the ground that I had to hit the queue right here, and from then on was kind of a normal flight. So if I go look at XCB, I will take a look at that flight. And actually, before I get into that, the thing that would be useful is to look at the overall thermal sampling comparison. So you can see the profile of here's the strongest thermals and the relative amount of time that was spent in those thermals, and then all the way down to the weakest ones. And as I usually say, it's this part right here where a lot of time is gained or lost in these weak thermals. So I'm curious about this one. I can click on it to actually go to that part of the track to see at what heights. So maybe the pilot was getting low at that point. Actually, it was just one. It was just one circle that looks like it lost a lot of time on that one circle. 27 seconds. So thermal selection is a big part of it, and avoiding circling and the really bad stuff. Green looks like or F1L looks like it doesn't drop off quite as much, but just the overall climb rates were much lower, which we'll look at the thermaling to see if that's an effect, or in terms of the thermaling technique, or it might have just been really bad luck in terms of the thermals that were being provided. So This gives a nice kind of overview of the thermal selection for the whole flights. So back to blue here. So it gets the first climb here. So you can see you see compared to HG1, the shape of the thermaling, where there's just a lot more overcorrecting. So it's best when entering, especially these very wide thermals, just to take your time, because it can be a while before it builds. And then right when the vario's feeling like it's peaked and it's starting to not accelerate as quickly, then turn quite assertively to start your first turn. And usually you can be pretty much, with these wide thermals, you can be pretty much effectively centered right from the get-go. So we'll look at this one. So you can see here, so the first 60 seconds were definitely a lot less than the last 60 seconds. But overall, this thermal was cost quite a bit of time relative. So it was over a minute was lost in a minute and a half, almost was lost just in this one thermal. And then we get to this one, which definitely looks better. And the climb rate is much better. And so it's interesting because this poor thermal lost a minute and a half almost, and this quite good thermal only added 21 seconds. So avoiding weak thermals is about twice as important as finding strong thermals. So here's another one here, and let's look at actually let's go back to this one here and just take a look at a few of the details. So it took a little bit to get centered, but then or actually no, I'm wrong. The first circle was really good, and then the thermal might have weakened off. After that, bank angle looks good. Radius is okay. Speed is all right. I'll just compare that to what. So probably could definitely thermal a little bit. Could slow it down a little bit more and tighten up that. You can tighten up that radius. For example, it can get the same radius at less bank by flying a little bit slower. So could probably slow down a little bit on the thermaling. And then it looks like there's a real good thermal. Here's a mega boomer of a thermal where the first bit of the climb was super good. And interesting, the bank must have been so strong that you banked really heavily into it, which can be done. But again, it could be more effective instead of banking at 50, which starts to become fairly inefficient. You could be flying, at 85 kilometers, which would be about, 45 knots or so, and it would do the same. It would have the same effect. So that was a really good thermal there. And continue on here. So this is where we're losing some time on fairly weak ones. And this here is a really big searching. I'm just going to see what it was above the ground. So our AGL is still almost 3,000 feet, so it probably wasn't desperation mode quite yet to be kind of doing a search pattern thermal, because that cost actually it would have cost, because this is showing this number here is based on the uncompensated number, but in reality the total energy is a more valid indication. So this was probably closer to a minute that was spent on that maneuver. And so another one there. So it's looking like you are doing, you are taking some sampling turns, which could maybe be reduced. but you are leaving thermals. So this is, not near as good as you had been getting during the flight. So that was a good thing to push on, because you hooked into something that was definitely better, and probably a good choice at this point to take that thermal, because you had been getting lower, and not do the same mistake that Hotel Golf 1 did by keeping pushing and pushing. So yeah, this one looks like it took a bit to center and then must have died off towards the top. Just going to take a look. It looks like there must have been a decent deviation. I'm not sure what decided to. Maybe there wasn't anything ahead, so you decided to sidetrack. That sidetrack definitely would have cost a bit of time as well. And then just hit a couple of, see what time was lost there. And so, yeah, some of these, if you're not really stuck, try to avoid the sampling turns until you're getting a bit lower and in more feeling more desperation. Try to just feel it out for this part of the turn, or before you start going backwards, start turning back on course if the thermal's not improving a bunch by the time you turn the 90 degrees. So let's take a look at F1L here. So first thermal, it looks like you had to do kind of a bigger but appropriate / accurate thermal centering adjustment, and then the rest of the spiral looks fairly nice there. So you can see, it lost some time in the first 60 seconds having to do that centering, but sometimes that's just how it goes, and you have to do the 270 if you turn the wrong direction to start. Speed looks all right. Could probably use a little bit more bank because the radius is a little bit bigger. It doesn't matter as much because these thermals are very wide, but it's good to work on being able to thermal with a little bit tighter as well. So yeah, there's a sampling turn here, and actually this one looks like you're probably still right close to cloud base, but it was strong, so you took one circle in it, which myself, I think that's often a good idea if it's really strong, and just to stay connected with the clouds, which for Hotel Golf 1, that was really important on the first leg, maintaining that connection. So sometimes if it's really strong, it is good just to take that extra single turn, and you still was a 10-second gain, even relative to your other thermals just from that one turn. So sometimes that can be a good idea. And similar thing here, a couple turns to stay connected, and you gain time on that, so it's helping out. So good entry, looks like good entry, good turns, so those are working well. And then again here, this one's not quite as good of a climb rate, but the entry looks, so the spiral looks fairly clean, so the thermaling technique is looking all right here, and just a little bit weaker of a thermal, and could maybe tighten up just a little bit on it. And another one here that it looks like you might have done something that I sometimes do, but this is another decent one. Interesting that so it's factoring in the exit here is why it's showing such a weak climb, because the last 60 seconds was so low. But it would have been a good thermal, and it looks like you might have did what I have done myself is exit the wrong way and then have to turn around. I've done that before for sure. So still staying connected with the clouds there. And this one here is looking like the thermaling for some reason started to get even quite really fast and fairly wide. It was still a pretty good thermal and it gained you time, but it might have been that much better to be. It's often the really strong ones that even reward you even more for tightening up, and they can work well to tighten up even more in the really strong ones. So, but overall fairly consistent spiral. And this one here, it looks like there's a little bit of chasing to try to find the center of the thermal. So that one lost a little bit of time. Again here, a little bit of centering correction. And kind of losing a bit of time. And this one here, yeah, it's another kind of searching. So it looks like your second leg, your first leg looked like it had fairly accurate, crisp thermaling spirals. And this one here looks like a fair bit of searching going on. So I don't know what the options were ahead for you at that point. You weren't particularly high. It looks like you had, let's see what you were for above the ground here. So, oh, you're still about 4,000 feet, so you still had height to spare with. So unless the options were like totally blew ahead, wouldn't have been worth chasing this one, because this cost quite a bit of time. This thermal, about 1:30 if I look at the total energy climb rate on that one. So yeah, so this one here, so and the speed's a little bit higher in these, and then from there you're on final glide. Yeah, so overall the first leg looked technique looked pretty good, and then the second leg it got a little bit fell away a little bit there. So try to keep that accurate, kind of more crisp thermaling technique that was done at the start of the race throughout the whole race. And the other big thing for F1L is if I look at the amount of detours, so far the flight is headed in kind of a reasonable amount of deviation to find clouds, but then all of a sudden it takes a large detour in this direction, which I'm not sure what the cause was for that, but that 45-degree deviation is quite costly when you probably could have just kept on heading in the same direction you were going. So, and this is particularly true where it's quite a strong day, and the stronger the day, the more the deviations are particularly inefficient and costly. So definitely be careful of this kind of large of deviations. That's the biggest one. There was some deviation kind of overall on this leg as well. So just try to keep that flight path more straight when it is such a strong day, because you can see overall there was about 9.4 kilometers of deviation. So that does slow down the flight quite a bit.